For episode 14, remember Meilin Ray from 2 seasons ago? Well, guess what? She's back. So the story begins at Sakura School at almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, long story short, there's Sakura painting a picture of a gazebo in the schoolyard. And it's an interesting picture, I do say so myself. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, that painting of the gazebo that Sakura's doing is part of the school's assignment, and she just realized how difficult it was. But she's not the only one who's painting. Eli's doing it too. And now she's wondering how his painting is coming along. So when Sakura approached Eli and asked if she would like to see the painting, so Eli said sure. And she went ahead and looked at it, and you can tell she was in awe. So Sakura went ahead and made a compliment with Eli to say how talented he is. Thanks a lot, Eli said. And then Eli and Sakura just watched Lee passing them by. So by the time that Lee stopped, he looked over his shoulder to look at both Eli and Sakura. Now, still for some unknown reason, though it was never explained, Lee had a reason to not trust Eli. So long story short, after Lee walked off, that's when Sakura looked at Eli to ask what was the matter with him and what was going on. Well, Eli said, I thought for a moment that someone was watching us and that someone was Lee. So Sakura looked around a little bit after she was asking Eli if he was sure. So she told him that whoever was there watching us moments ago is now gone. Well, Eli says that in Lee's case, he has a reason to be suspicious because he's been watching Eli and Sakura lately. So, being curious, when Sakura asks Eli why, that's when Eli explains that in Lee's case, he has a reason to know what Eli's been up to. So, unfortunately for Eli, Lee thought that he's up to something, but he doesn't know why. So speaking of which, back with Lee, he was approached by Madison, Sakura's best friend. So Madison wanted to know from Lee what was going on. Lee says, oh, nothing. Then Lee explains to Madison that he's been trying to make sense of what was going on and why those strange things are happening, but he hasn't had any idea yet. So Madison tells Lee, oh, don't worry. If there's a pattern somewhere, I'm sure you'll find it. You just have to look for it, that's all, Madison said. She's trying to be as supportive as she can be to Lee. But Lee says that in his case, the spell's getting stronger and stronger by the minute. And he's very worried. But in Lee's case, he has every reason to worry because I've known her cousin's cousin, Meilin Ray, from 2 seasons ago. And she just asked Lee and Madison a question. What are you two sitting around for? Now you can tell that both Madison and Lee are in shock to see that Meilin had appeared out of nowhere. So meanwhile in the school's classroom, everybody was glad to see that Meilin is back. Chelsea, Nikki, and Rita. And of course Sakura, but she'll show up later. So Madison, who was glad to see that Meilin is back, wanted to know from Lee, is she staying? Oh, she'll stay, Lee said, but not for very long because remember, back in season 2, episode 8, Meilin had to leave to take care of her sick grandmother. But, according to Lee, in Mei Lin's case, she wanted to be where the action is and she doesn't want to miss a single thing. At least that's what Lee said. So, speaking of Sakura, told you we get back to her later. She arrives at the classrooms to ask everyone, has Meilin arrived yet? Well, Meilin not only did arrive, but Meilin said hello to Sakura. So Sakura rushed to the classroom and then asked Meilin, what brings you by? Why are you here? Well, I figured you and your friends could need some help, Meilin said. Then Meilin pleased her case to say, I couldn't say I would be surprised myself. So Sakura says, gee, Meilin, we got a lot to talk about. So in other words, in Sakura's case, that she and Meilin got a lot of catching up to do during Meilin's visit. So Sakura was asking Meilin if they could meet up later after school. Then Sakura says, unless you had something else on your mind. Well, by accident, that's when Meilin just let slip to Sakura to say, on the contrary, I just came to help you. I thought you may need some help on my expertise or something, she said. So after Sakura nodded, that's when Meilin says, "Well, that's great. We'll meet at the gates after school," she suggested. And so she heads off. So long story short, meanwhile at the Avalon residence, there's Kiro in Sakura's upstairs room playing a video game when he receives a phone call from Sakura. Well, back at school, Sakura just lets Kiro know that first of all, she's going to be running a little late. Second of all, there's some good news. Meilin just came to visit. So back in Sakura's upstairs room at the Avalon residence, Kiro says, "So let me get this straight. Lee's girlfriend is back in town, right?" "Yeah, but only for a couple of days," Sakura said. Of course, Sakura says that even better, they may need Meilin's help later on. "What do you mean we may need her help?" Kiro asked. "You tell her that we don't need her help," Kiro suggested. So back at school with Sakura, she just gave Kiro some advice that maybe you shouldn't be so hard on Meilin. So after Sakura ends the phone call with Kiro, that's when she sees Eli coming up the stairs. So when Eli looked up at Sakura, he asked a question. "Am I interrupting your phone call or something?" "Gosh, I hope not," he said. Then Sakura says, "No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I just finished," she said. So Sakura goes downstairs to ask Eli what's going on. "Well, I'm just curious," Eli said. "Who's the girl that just arrived earlier?" "Well, her name is Meilin Ray," Sakura said. So even though Eli said that he has never met Meilin before, that's when Sakura started to explain to him that how she and Lee grew up together in Hong Kong, where they come from, and etc. Then Sakura also explains to Eli that how she once came to school with herself, Madison, and her friends, and including Lee, but she had to leave because her grandmother is sick. Now Eli finds this very interesting and says, "Really? Is that a fact?" "Well," Sakura says, she says that she and Meilin, along with Madison and Lee, are going out after school later. "Well, that's very good to know," Eli said, and so he heads off. So, by the time the school had ended, all four of them, Madison, Lee, Sakura, and Madison, were on their way to Penguin Park. And as they were walking along, Sakura was just staring and smiling at her. So Meilin couldn't help but wonder what is Sakura smiling about, so Sakura was more than happy to answer that. She says, "Well, Meilin, I'm just happy to see that you're back. That's all," she said. So Meilin says, "Really? Is that all?" "Well, things just hasn't been the same without you around," Sakura said. "So I felt that the whole game is back together again," she said. Then Meilin, in omission by confession, to say, "As much as I hate to admit it, I kind of miss me too," she said. So Meilin, being curious, wanted to know from Sakura, "So let me get this straight. You're the mistress of the cards now, right?" So Sakura not only told Meilin that she is, but she's got 25 star cards so far, but there's still a lot to do. "But according to Lee," Meilin says, "there's still some strange things that are happening here." "That's right," Sakura said. So Meilin says, "What I want to know from you, are you sure you can handle it?" So Sakura asked a question. "What do you mean?" "Well, I mean, you are going to need me, right?" Meilin said. "Because, as Meilin says in her case, she's got more training than Sakura does." "Gee, Meilin, you haven't changed at least much a bit," Sakura said. So after Meilin and Sakura are walking off, so that leaves Lee and Madison. And Madison says, "Gee, it's nice to have Meilin back, right?" "Of course," Lee said. "I happen to agree with it." So, although Lee does agree with Madison that it is nice to have Meilin back, but Meilin, however, according to what Lee said, hopes that she knows what she's doing, what she's getting into. Although Lee said, "I also can agree that Meilin is a good friend." So, flashback again 2 seasons ago from season 1, episode 20, when Meilin at the time before she left had a hand-to-hand combat with the fight cards form on the bridge at Penguin Park. Well, 3 rounds of it to be exact. So, long story short, back to the present. That's when Meilin, according to what Madison says in her case to Lee, that she can take care of herself and can handle it. So Lee, who happens to agree with Madison, says, I guess you're right, as much as I like to admit it. So as the four of them continue to walk on the bridge to Penguin Park, long story short, back with Sakura and Meilin, Sakura made a suggestion to Meilin to show her what the star cars looked like after they were transformed. And of course, Meilin agrees. So long story short, now that the four of them had arrived at Penguin Park, Madison wanted to know from Sakura what was going on with her. Well, according to Sakura, she told her best friend Madison that she sensed something really weird. Now, Lee, on the other hand, who agrees with Sakura, he too sensed something weird. Then Meilin has her turn to ask a question. Hey, Lee, what's going on? But before Lee can answer Meilin's question, something weird is definitely going on. And before that could happen, guess what? The penguin statues, for some unknown reason, just came to life and plucked themselves out of the sand at Penguin Park. So, long story short, after Meilin screams in horror as the penguin statues were coming to life and coming to attack, and that causes the four of them to split up. So, we have Meilin with Sakura and Madison with Lee. So, back with Madison and Lee that were running in the other direction on the bridge, that's when Madison tripped and fell. Lee was getting worried that something bad would happen to Madison, so he did what any person would do, tried to save her. And so he did. So thanks to Lee using his power of lightning from his sword, it gave Madison enough time to move, and Lee enough time to attack. When Madison runs behind Lee with good news, she's fine. So it's now up to Lee to attempt another attack, in which he did. But unfortunately for the penguin statues that just came to life, it dodged every lightning attack, so now they're going after Sakura and Meilin. So back with Meilin and Sakura, they were warned by Lee that there are penguin statues coming to them, but luckily for Meilin, she came prepared and punched one of the statues. So back with Meilin, speaking of which, she still has her fighting skills, so she's fighting off the penguin statues that are enchanted the best way she knew how. So, after the fight, although Meilin is otherwise fine, that's what she told Sakura, her hands are sore for all that fighting that she did. So the girls ran up to Lee and Madison. Well, luckily they're fine too. But then, the four of them, Lee, Sakura, Meilin, and Madison, just couldn't believe what they saw next. A penguin slide lifting up in the air like it was levitating. So yes, not only are the penguin statues are possessed, but the king penguin slide is possessed too. So Sakura, according to what she says in her case, since her magic isn't strong enough for the time card to freeze them, she knew she has to come up with something quick. Then Meilin has her turn to ask a question. Why can't these penguins just go back to the North Pole where they come from? She said. But then, light bulb, Meilin has an idea. So she asks Sakura if she has a freeze card. Sakura says that she does. So Meilin says, I know this sounds crazy, but with the freeze card, it just might work. You're right, Sakura said. So, thanks to Meilin's quick thinking, you know what this means. That means Sakura, as always, uses her star staff. So, that also means she has to transform another card, the freeze card. You remember 2 seasons ago, Sakura captured it at the skating rink. So thanks to the freeze card, now the star card, that makes it number 26 on the list, all the penguin statues, including the penguin slide, were frozen in ice. But Lee knows what to do. Use the element of lightning for the third time. Well, the third time's a charm for Lee, so this time it worked. And so the spell was broken thanks to the teamwork of Sakura and Lee. Meilin was overjoyed and said, We did it! We actually did it! We sure did, Sakura said, and we owe it all to your quick thinking. So yes, it is true, giving credit to where it's due, Meilin really helped out that day. Now, Sakura is very confused, And she says that whatever's going on, someone or something has the magic that is strong enough to move those penguin statues in the slide themselves. Now, Madison nodded because she happens to agree with Sakura. Then Sakura was asking Meilin if she's going to be okay. At first, Meilin doesn't say a word, but then Sakura says, "You're not hurt or anything, are you?" Well, Meilin says that first of all, no, she's not hurt in any way. And yes, she's absolutely fine. So back with Eli, who was on the roof of the building along with Spinner and Ruby, and he pleaded himself a case to say, "Yes, Meilin must know about the course, and I have to agree with it," he said. So long story short, back with Madison, Sakura, Lee, and Meilin, they just heard someone coming, and it's coming from across the bridge at Penguin Park. So who was that was coming? I cannot say for sure, so the four of them ran off. So long story short, back with Madison, Lee, Sakura, and Meilin, who had just left Penguin Park, now for them that was too close of a call. They almost got into trouble that day. So Sakura, as you can see, has pleaded her case to say, "We could have sworn that we heard someone coming. Now that is really, really weird." But now what's even weirder, according to what Sakura says, whoever made the footsteps is now gone. Well, Lee had a hunch. It could have been someone who made the penguin slide and the statues that had come to life. Now, according to Lee, what he says in his case, whatever's going on, and now here's something even weirder. Every time something strange is going on, and there was nobody there. But the way I figure it, Lee says, someone has to be a powerful magician just like what Cloud Reed was. Madison, on the other hand, has her turn to plead her case to Meilin. She says that lately both Kiro and Sakura have sensed that Cloud Reed's magic is somewhere, but now, according to what Madison said, she had no idea what to make of it. Then Meilin has her turn to ask a question, but how could this be? How's that possible? Well, Madison just told Meilin that she's not so sure of it. Then Sakura says, "Don't worry, I'm sure we'll figure it out." But Meilin just told Madison, Lee, and Sakura the bad news that she's going to be leaving the next day. Gee, what a shame, Sakura says. But now Sakura says that her only regret is if Meilin could stay a little longer. So Meilin, who agrees with Sakura to say, "Maybe I can arrange that. You just be sure that I'll be back again soon," she said. Or, Meilin says, "You guys can come visit me. That's even better." So later that night at Lee's apartment, there's Lee outside talking to Meilin. So Meilin wanted to know from Lee if everything turned out all right. "Well, not really," Lee said. "But I guess you could say it did turn out all right," Lee said. Then Meilin gave Lee the compliment to say, "You may have failed the final judgment and may not be the master of the cards at all, but I just want you to know that I'm very proud of you," she said. So Lee asked the question, "Really? You think so?" So long story short, back with Eli, Ruby, and Spinner, now Ruby wanted to know by asking a question to Eli, "Why are you so interested in Lee anyhow?" But Eli doesn't say a word. He just stands there and stares right at Lee and Meilin across the way at Lee's apartment. So, meanwhile, back at Lee's apartment, Lee and Meilin, speaking of which, are still talking to each other on the balcony. Now, what that conversation was about, I cannot say for sure, but Meilin had to admit that Lee was just lucky. "What do you mean?" Lee asked. "Well, I'm just saying that you're happy that you're here when you're needed," Meilin said. Then Meilin started to compliment to Lee that he was part of the Cloud Dynasty and is part of the heritage and etc. And she says that no matter what happens and who the master is, you have a role to play in this, she said. So before heading in, that's when Meilin said there is one more thing that she should tell him. "Well, becoming a Cloud Dynasty is part of your responsibility. It's a big role," she said, And of course, she's not kidding when she said it. So once she went inside, she took a sip of tea from the dinette table. So after Meilin has her cup of tea, she told Wing Wei that she's spending a night at Madison's house. So as Meilin heads off, Lee runs to catch up with her. He says, "Wait a minute, we need you too," he said. So before heading off to Madison's house, that's when Lee admitted to Meilin that he never got a chance to tell her, and now he wished he had. But according to Meilin, he doesn't need to, and so she left. Now Lee is ashamed with regret and guilt, and he started to run after her, but Wing Wei wouldn't allow it. So he tells him, "Lee, just let her go," he said. The reason? Well, Wing Wei just pleaded a case to say Mei Lin is about as strong as you are, more than you know. The next morning at the airport, it was now time for Mei Lin to leave since she spent the night at Madison's house. Before Mei Lin can leave, that's when Wing Wei, who was there, told her, "I know this is difficult for you, but Lee just wants you to know how much she appreciates you helping him," he said. "And he never got the chance to tell you that," he said. So what Wing Wei is telling Mei Lin how much Lee appreciates her friendship. So Mei Lin says, "I know." Oh, I almost forgot. Lee's at the airport too. So when Mei Lin says, "Hey, what are you standing around for? Come say goodbye," she said. And so that's what Lee did. But instead of running to her, that's when Mei Lin went to him. She says, "What's wrong?" "Well," Lee says, "I just want you to know that we're just happy to have you here again," he said. "I also want you to know that you have helped us out when you're needed," Lee said. "As a matter of fact," Lee says, "you were pretty brave the other day," Lee said. Well, having said that, that's when Meilin smiled at him. And Meilin says, "Really? Do you mean it?" "Well, what took you so long to have you say that?" Meilin asked. Then Meilin says, "Now don't get it wrong. I know you have magical powers and stuff like that, but I can beat you in a kickboxing match if I want to," Meilin said. "And any day of the week," she said. "And I just wanted to make sure that you'll never forget this," she said. So Meilin says, "Well, this is it. I guess this is goodbye then. I'll see you later," Meilin said. So after Lee said goodbye to his cousin Meilin, that's when Meilin heads off. So long story short, meanwhile at school, Sakura just got a letter from Meilin, and so did Madison. So although curious, Madison wanted to know from Sakura what did her letter say when Madison got it the other day. Well, Madison was more than happy to answer that. She said that her letter from Meilin said that she and Lee had resolved their differences. "Well, that's great," Sakura said. "What about you?" Madison asked. "What did your letter say?" "Well," Sakura says, "according to Meilin's letter, it said that she may not have the same powers as Lee did, although she is part of the Cloud Dynasty after all. Of course, she has a role to play, just like the rest of us," Sakura said. "Well, in the end, you just never know who will make the difference," Sakura said. Having said that, that made Madison very happy, so she smiled at her. "There is one thing we can agree and to admit," Sakura said. "Meilin is indeed, without a doubt, a good friend, and she's not kidding." Well, you've heard right. Sakura now has 26 star cards on the list, but there's still a lot to go. So that ends episode 14.